All right, let's move on to another very important conversation. Residents in Oti region say they have no idea there are oil revenue funded projects in the region. In an interaction with members of the Public Interest Accountability Committee, the residents also asked that government considers investing in monumental projects instead of the projects being worked on. They want proceeds from the Heritage Fund to be properly invested. Correspondent Peter Senu has a wrap of PIAC's event in the Oti region, after which we will come back with a conversation with Benjamin Akapo, a proper breakdown of why projects have been listed, yet they are not on the ground, and the people who live there say they have never ever seen those projects except on paper.
Members of the Public Interest Accountability Committee, PIAC, were in the Oti region to engage the public as part of their 10 years anniversary celebration and also inspect some oil revenue funded projects here in the Oti region. However, residents here say before the coming of PIAC, they were unaware about any oil revenue funded projects here in the Oti region. I have been interacting with some of them.
It is now that I will say that there has been more information on some of these activities, and it's very good for us. Citizens should be involved. There must be more communication on projects that are sent to various districts so that we can all be on board, monitor what is going on.
No, not at all. You know, we see projects springing up here and there, but much of the time we don't have the privilege of knowing where the funding is coming from. So until this session today, we didn't know that projects such as those ones they mentioned were being funded by the proceeds from the oil revenue.
The discussion about the Heritage Fund also came up. Residents here in the Oti region say they would rather want government to put up monumental structures or projects with the oil revenue rather than put it in the Heritage Fund that would devaluate over a period.
Any money kept undergoes devaluation if it is not well invested in other ventures. So to keep that money for generations to come, I believe that if it is not well managed, it will lose its value. And looking at the challenges facing the country now, I would prefer that however little we have should be spent now, and whatever it is spent on will be of better benefit to the next generation.
I agree to that because we have a lot of problems now. When we are able to develop now, it will help the future generation. So whatever money we have, we should use it for development so that the future generation will also come to benefit instead of putting the money down somewhere for them.
They must as well, let the private sector take part in it, and then also preserve some for posterity, because our children are coming, more are going to be born, which also need to benefit from it.
I believe that we should invest more in monumental projects that will last generations, rather than these little projects as far as 5,000, 6,000, which are technically negligible vis-a-vis the type of expenditure we are looking at.
PIAC has also been speaking to JoyNews on the need for this public sensitization. Eric Defo is the head of the communications subcommittee at PIAC.
As part of the requirement of PIAC under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, we seek public interest and feedback on the usage of the petroleum revenues, as well as account to the citizenry about how the revenues have been utilized. We've come to the Oti region primarily to share information with them on the 2020 annual report, pick ideas and suggestions from them relating to how the citizens of Oti would want petroleum revenues to be utilized. And then there are a number of projects that have been funded with petroleum revenues within the Oti region, which we'll be inspecting to ascertain the veracity and the quality of the projects that have been implemented. Well, the citizens of Oti are desirous of us having monumental projects funded by the oil revenue rather than the thin spread that goes across all communities over the country. They want to have projects that are monumental in such that future generations, when they come, will also come and benefit from the projects that have been implemented. We expect that a listening government will hit the call of its citizens. The needs of the country are enormous, but then if we are sure that resources are being put to good use, the sacrifices that the citizens may make, I think that they'll be willing to do so. But if we don't get proper benefit out of these projects, then telling citizens to make sacrifices will be difficult. For example, so far over the past 10 years, the country has received about $6.5 billion of oil revenues, but we are unable to see any major projects that have come out of this. And it looks like the resources have been spread thin, some of it into recurrent expenditure and the capital expenditure into very micro projects which will not last or are not sustainable. So government needs to reconsider what it does with the oil revenues, and I hope that they will take the contributions of the citizens seriously and do what we want them to do.
The project tour was not left without controversies. In the Krachi West District, the Assembly was not aware about some projects within its jurisdiction, despite being the representative of the central government.
But the concern we have is that after it was carved out, there was a need for staff so that they can man the various offices. But we realized that we didn't have enough office space. So we decided that let's make a proposal to see if government can help us put up a story building.
And that's how we kickstart our conversation as we talk about the Public Interest and Accountability Committee on the back of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, Act 815 of 2011, and the many dynamics to take stock of 10 years down the line, a decade down the line. Are we getting what we ought from our petroleum revenues? I'm joined by Isaac Jamana. He is a coordinator with PIAC. There's also Mark Ajiman, who is technical manager with PIAC. This morning, we lay bare all the crucial issues. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, so, I mean, we were just discoursing before we came on air about these $6.5 billion and even joking about the fact that it's not the Canadian or the Liberian dollar or any other dollar. Yeah. It is the American dollar. That's for right. That fact. I think if we do the quick multiplication, 6.5 times, that would be about 6. So 6 is 36, right? Yeah. So even that alone is about 36 billion. Not to talk about the 0.5. So we're talking about something hovering around 40 billion. Ghana cedis, which is just about, what, 20-30 billion shy of our, usual GDP in dollar terms, not in CD terms, in dollar terms. But broadly speaking, has the PIAC on the back of, the PRM, on the back of your, vision and mission, have you seen the sort of strict adherence to, the requirements that you would have seen and wanted to see under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act? Have you? I'll direct that to you first.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning to your viewers. The PRMA, as it stands, actually has a framework that actually guides the collection and then distribution and even the utilization of the revenue accrued from petroleum activities. So it says that all petroleum revenue should be collected into a single fund known as the Petroleum Holding Fund, and out of the fund, there are distribution guidelines that funds taken from the PHL should adhere to. Says that not more than 55% of the carried and participating interest revenue stream should be given to the National Oil Company, which is currently the GNPC. So you see, you can't go beyond 55%. Currently, as we speak, we are doing between 25 to 30%. Now it says that what is left, not more than 70% should be put into the national budget. So you can't go beyond the 70%. You can be below the 70, right, but you can't go beyond. Exactly. And since 2011 till 2020 and even 2021, we've always done the 70%. The 30% that is left says that 9% of it should be used as an intergenerational equity that goes into the Ghana Heritage Fund. And the 21% goes into the stabilization fund. And even what goes to the national budget, there are various ways that you have to expend the money. The law says that first, if there is a long-term national development plan, it should be spent through the long-term national development plan in accordance with that plan. In absence of that, there are a list of 12 areas that every medium term, the minister is required to choose up to 4. So you can choose 1, 2, 3, or the maximum 4. And then expend petroleum revenue through the national budgets on these programs and projects. Unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, because since 2011, we have always chosen the maximum 4 priority areas. Some will argue that we could have concentrated on 1 priority area and spent petroleum revenue on for 3 years, and then do an assessment of that priority area. If there's the need to maintain that priority area, we maintain. Or if we think we've done so much in that sector, we choose another area and then invest petroleum revenues in.
So when you say unfortunately, so you would prefer, I mean, from the setting, that we maybe focus on 1 or 2 and then, you know, hammer on those areas as far as the use of our petroleum revenue is concerned?
Yeah, in practice, okay, what we've witnessed over the past 10 years is that because we choose 4 priority areas, and sometimes in administering and applying the ABFA, we seem to even go beyond the 4 priority areas chosen and approved by Parliament. So in practice, because we usually go for the highest number, we realize that at the end of the year, we spread the projects. We choose so many projects covering these 4 areas, and because of that, we spread the money so thinly across these projects, and at the end of the year, the needed impact that the revenue you want to see in these areas is not felt. So you have projects getting a meager 5,000 Ghana cedis. Last year alone, okay, over 4,000 projects were undertaken through the ABFA. And the funds available for that was around 2.7 billion Ghana cedis across 4,000 projects. And if you do the analysis, you have some projects receiving as little as 5,000 Ghana cedis to a project, which has a contract sum of sometimes 30 million Ghana cedis, 20 million Ghana cedis, and you're putting in 5,000 Ghana cedis of petroleum revenue. So that is the effect of going for the maximum, choosing so many programs and projects under the priority areas and then spreading the money thinly.
Let me quickly ask you this before I move on. Would you say then that it is time after a decade, because then again, when you look at our laws, our statutes, and some of these things that we formulate, from time to time you must review them, you must take a look at them. Do you think it's time for the PRM itself to be tweaked a bit to maybe reflect better the aims and aspirations of ordinary Ghanaians, in line with some of what you're saying?
The PRM has already undergone a review in 2015. And
so of course, in 2011, then we had the 2015
yes.
one. But I mean, after even that, because then again, we've come another few years, and it appears some of what you've been talking about since 2011 are still happening.
Yeah, I was going to dovetail into that. Actually, we started a review process 2 years ago. It has stalled currently, but then it is undergoing review. Most of the institutions that have something to do with the PRM have made proposals. Some have been accepted, others have been rejected. So the review has been done. It has been submitted to the Ministry of Finance, and then the ministry will intend to submit to the Attorney General's Department for them to put it in the legal language. So that review is still ongoing, though for the past, say, 8-9 months, it has stalled. But then it is still ongoing. And some of these issues and some of these lessons learned over the operationalization of the PRMA has been brought to bear in this review process. And it is the hope that when it's submitted to Parliament, it will be subjected to the strictest of scrutiny for us to get best out of the PRMA.
Okay, so Ike, coming to you on narrowing it down further, because like it or not, administrations are always in charge at a particular point in time, and you must work with them. So the first 5 years under one administration, and these last close to 5 years under this current administration, what would you say has been the level of adherence to the Act, you know, in terms of relevant institutions, public institutions, complying with what the Act says as of this point in time?
All right, thank you. So let's not look at it 5 years, 5 years. Let's look at it 6 years and let's say 4+ years. And
I only did that because of the political dispensation.
Yes, my reason is this. the PRMA requires that the priority areas be selected for a period of 3 years. So from 2011 to 14, we had the first selection. Okay. Then 14, 15, 16, we had the second selection. So that was the second, let me say, second period for the selection of priority areas. And then 17 to 19, we had the third period. We are currently from 2020 to 2022, we are in a new dispensation of priority areas. So that has been, so that explains my suggestion that it should rather be 6 and then 4+ instead of 5. Now, I would say that from 2011, even up to date, 10 years on since the PRMA came into force, it's been progressive, it's been developmental, because, you know, we had never traveled this path before of having an act, a statute in place to guide the management and use of petroleum revenue from a natural resource. We had mined gold for so many years, and we didn't have so good a story to tell, to the extent that in 2000 we declared HEPIC. So since 2011, if you look at the PIAC reports that have been, you would see some of the challenges we had with the implementation of the PRMA. I remember that even Salt Pond Offshore then nearly took PIAC to court because we had raised the issues of surface rentals not being paid. From 2017 to date, I would say that, let me talk about two main things. One thing that discussions brought up was the need for the Minister for Finance to give, to provide updates. The PRMA provides that when priority areas are selected and projects are selected and are implemented, the Minister for Finance is required to provide updates of implementation. Now, since 2011, we had not complied with this provision. So it is from 2017 that the Minister for Finance began providing information to enable citizens know the progress made on the projects selected. And we started with the progress in percentages. So then the report the Minister for Finance would provide would say that the implementation of this road project is about 70% complete. Now, for someone who is not into road construction, what does 70% completion
technically savvy in that regard?
So then it makes it difficult to appreciate the extent of work done on the project. And so it is one of the points PIAC has picked, and I would say that it's not just PIAC, civil society organizations in the industry have also raised this issue, that the Minister for Finance, or the ministry for that matter, is supposed to go beyond the provision of progress in percentage terms and describe them in such vivid way that the ordinary person to whom the report is being made will understand and appreciate the extent of work. Because if you go into the community, the people there should be able to connect with the progress of work that the ministry has given.
And that is something we'll be getting into as we talk about more recent events, your report, and even in the OT region, latest developments. But what has been the response so far from the ministry on the back of that suggestion?
Well, the ministry has also explained their side that it is not easy to provide such detailed prose of the extent of work. You can only give an idea. So what we have sought from the ministry is the ministry not to only provide description in words, but also in pictures or video where necessary, so that when the citizen sees, or if anybody sees, it becomes easier to appreciate. It is an ongoing discussion, and so we do not think that we have come to the end to be drawing conclusions. PIAC continues to engage the ministry, and continual discussions are expected to yield the fruit of better disclosures that citizens can relate to. Let me mention this requirement which the government in the 2020 annual report of PIAC indicated did not comply. You know, my colleague Mark mentioned that the Minister for Finance is required by the PRMA to select at most 4 priority areas over 3 years. Now, when the minister does the selection, Parliament is supposed to approve the selection before disbursements can be made of revenue, petroleum revenue, to these priority areas. Now, in 2017, when this administration came into office, it coincided with the selection of priority areas. So the government selected 4 priority areas. health, education, roads and other critical infrastructure, and then agric. So these are the 4 priority areas the minister selected over 2017 to 19. The minister went to Parliament in the 2017 budget and presented it and said, we present these proposed priority areas for the approval of Parliament. And Parliament approved them, and that formed the basis of the disbursement that was made. Rather, I wouldn't say fortunately, unfortunately, in 2020, that was not done. So if you go through the entire 2020 budget, you will not see the new priority areas selected, presented to Parliament for approval. So PIAC
that would be in breach of what the PRMA says.
Obviously. It's in breach. So PIAC raised this issue in the 2020 annual report. And you know, before the report is published, we have the validation meeting where all the stakeholders are present to speak to aspects of the report that relate to them. And the explanation the ministry gave was that if you look at the appendix of the budget, and you will find the priority areas given not under priority areas really, because PIAC went to check, and what we found was that the areas are not the 4 or 3 or 2 or 1 priority area as stipulated in the Act. The petroleum revenues have been brought under ministries, departments, and agencies. So you would find the Ministry of Education, let's say 600 million Ghana cedis, for instance. But Ministry of Education is not a priority area. Probably the minister intended that those funds would go to the education priority area. But PIAC's expectation is that the priority areas will be presented the same way the PRMA says it should be done, should be presented the same way the same minister did in the year 2017. So these are the 2 things I'll point out when it relates to this administration and then compliance, strict compliance with the PRMA. But my colleague also mentioned that to a very large extent, the various disclosures and publications of reports and things like that, reconciliation report to Parliament, petroleum revenue management report to Parliament, those reports are published as they should. Bank of Ghana, GMPC, Ghana Revenue Authority, Petroleum Commission, these institutions of state to a very large extent have met the disclosure requirements as provided for in the Act.
Okay, so now that we've safely waded into the arena of your reports, the latest one, you have 19 annual and semi-annual reports thus far, including the 2021. What would you say the report is, especially focusing on efficiency, accountability, and transparency in terms of the use of our oil revenues? What has PIAC unearthed in this regard?
Yeah, thank you. So efficiency, I mean, the efficiency in utilizing the revenue, this has been an issue since 2011 when we started publishing our report. It's something that we are much concerned about, and it's something that upon interacting with the general public, they are also much concerned about how we are going to use our petroleum revenue differently to probably diversify and modernize the economy to have different growth pillars going forward. To a large extent, even just before we walked in and our member was speaking to some of these issues, to a large extent, the kind of development, the kind of transformation that you will want to see the petroleum revenue do for the past 10 years has, to a large extent, been lacking.
So $6.5 billion. And as your colleague made mention of, what do we have to show in real terms for those $6.5 billion?
In tangible terms, what do we have to show? So to a large extent, that is the issue. But when it comes to efficiency in managing the petroleum funds, so you have the ABFA and you have the petroleum funds, which is the stabilization and the heritage funds. If you come to the efficiency in managing that, to a large extent, the Bank of Ghana, with the help of the Investment Advisory Committee, has done a good number of work in that regard. They are only being limited by the kind of investment instruments that they are allowed to invest the petroleum funds in, because the PRMA actually prescribed the qualifying instruments to which they can invest the petroleum funds in, and they are of low risk nature, and because of that, the returns from such investment are also very small. Okay. Now, if you come to accountability, which I will call, if you come to transparency, which I will call disclosures, we have done quite well in that regard. Because you see, PIAC publishes its report, that's a form of disclosure. The ministry and the relevant agencies discloses information to PIAC. The Ministry of Finance itself publishes its reconciliation report. The Bank of Ghana publishes a report on the management or the performance of the Ghana Petroleum Funds. The audit service audits the petroleum funds. GMPC, even some civil society organizations also publish reports in the arena of petroleum revenue management and its utilization. So to a large extent, as far as transparency is concerned, we have done quite a number of work there. The issue is how to transition from this transparency to accountability. That is where the issue is. To bridge that gap, that is where the issue is.
So you're laying bare the issues, but how do you ensure that these issues are bringing in the sort of accountable,
yes,
revenue allocation or revenue placement that we want to see?
That is the issue. Though the PRMA has provision for sanctions if it's breached, or if there's a misappropriation or embezzlement of funds, that's petroleum revenue. But you see, to realize this accountability mechanism, that is where it is lacking, because the power is entrusted in the Attorney General, okay, and the managers or the institutions that uses petroleum funds are public institutions, okay. So, how to get the Attorney General to hold public officials, sometimes colleagues of his or hers, to account is the dichotomy where we find ourselves in. Okay, so PIAC actually, through our own initiative in trying to bridge this gap, I think a year or two years ago, decided to enter into an MOU with IOCO, so that IOCO can take up some of the issues that you raise in our report and also in our public project inspection outreach. But then we realized that IOCO will have to submit its investigative reports back to the Attorney General. So going forward, we wanted to liaise with the Office of the Special Prosecutor to kind of help us to bring
Are things going to be any different with the Office of the Special Prosecutor?
Because the Office of the Special Prosecutor has the powers to prosecute on its own. IOCO will have to submit it to
I'm just looking at past experience.
Yes,
I mean, let's be brutally honest.
Yes.
And some have even said that the Office of the Special Prosecutor is an extension, an appendage, if you like, of the work of the Attorney General. I'm just looking at it from a very broad angle like that. That's why, because if you use that door, and it's going to end up with the Attorney General anyway, and you might say that in certain instances, because he is part of administration, there might be some pushing and shoving there. I don't know what you're going to achieve if you go through.
So these are some of the options we are exploring. But then it's important to add that Parliament on its own is an accountability body. It's an accountability institution. And time again, Parliament has shown that when the PRMA is breached, when misappropriation of funds happens, Parliament usually rise to the occasion to call institutions and persons to order that, look, you need to do this, you need to do that. For instance, when PIAC disclosed that some 1.48 billion Ghana cedis was unutilized and unaccounted for, Parliament actually directed the Ministry of Finance to do a year-by-year accounting to the House so that they get to know how the money has been utilized. And in the 2020 report, the Ministry sought to account to PIAC, but probably not in a manner that the committee will have wanted, but they have accounted to PIAC. We are yet to meet Parliament, hopefully on Thursday, and we will see how the House will take that accounting. The other accountability option that we are exploring is PIAC is made up of constituent bodies. We are trying to leverage the strength of these constituent bodies to actually help in the accounting process.
Okay, let me come to you. I'll be shifting gear when it comes to your latest report. But on the bit about institutional compliance, have you had cause to believe there has been some corruption at any point on this 10-year journey in recent times, in the past, as far as PIAC is concerned, in terms of the use of our petroleum revenue?
Well, I would not say corruption, but I would just talk about the issue as we found it, or as we find it. In 2016, the committee engaged the public. We conducted about 61 district engagements with the public in line with our second mandate of creating a platform for citizens' debate. And these engagements led us to the northern part of the country. And so the chairman and the members decided that if we are in the northern part of the country, let's take advantage of our presence and inspect some of the ABFA-funded projects. And we conducted inspection on 6 projects. 2 of them were non-existent. We didn't find 2 of them. We went to the supposed locations of the projects. We spoke to opinion leaders, assembly members, and hard as we tried, we did not find the projects. We put all our findings in a report. I'm sure you may have heard about it on air. I mean, this was something that was talked about. This was brought to the attention of government. And so it is one thing I will mention. But let
it was brought to the attention of government, and what happened?
Well, what the Ministry of Finance indicated was that they would go and check, because probably what may have happened was that the funds were released, but they ended up paying for some arrears on their project, and so we did not feel the impact even after the release of the funds. Because it's as if though funds went to the project, nothing tangible happened on the ground. So for the people on the ground, there was no difference.
Okay.
Then also in our inspections, we have come across projects that have been executed all right, but the quality of work leaves much to desire. You get there and a project which is about 2-3 years old, probably a classroom block, is already showing signs of deterioration. I think in the eastern region, Achim, one of the Achim towns, I think a classroom block was already sinking at the time we got in. Very clear, splits and things like that. So
even in terms of value for money, some of these projects are being value for money is problematic.
Exactly.
Tell us about the recent report. We've had some cause for concern in the OT region, and then as you've gone up north to the 5 northern regions. How well are people owning what we're doing, and what is their understanding of the projects? I hear in the OT region, you were in Nkwanta.
He was in Nkwanta, so he was speaking to the OT.
Some people even feel that there was no consultation, and that is part of your work. There was no consultation, and so what is being done and what their expectations are, there's a bit of a disjointedness there. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. See, time and time again, we have mentioned and made emphatically to the ministry that one would have hoped that before you take a project to a district, you will have actually consulted the medium-term development plan of that district, because we know that plan is consultative enough. So if you take projects, developmental projects out of that plan, it represents the broader needs of the people, okay? But more often than not, the contracts are awarded in Accra, and then contractors are sent directly to site to start work. The RCCs are not made aware. The district assemblies are not made aware, not less the public in the district. And also signage on some of these projects does not show that probably full funding or part funding of this project is coming from petroleum revenue. And that brought the issue we encountered in the Ketekrachi municipal area, where we went to inspect a project, an administration block. Because of the new regions created, the Ministry of Reorganization, in liaison with these regions, decided to decentralize the administrative structures in the regions. So if you go to the OT region, for instance, the RCC is in Dambai, okay? The regional district, the regional education office is in Jasekai. The Agric is in Nkwanta. The feeder roads is in Ketekrachi. And then health, I think health is in either Rara or KGB. That's how they've decentralized the administrative structures. So, per the description of project given to us by the Ministry of Finance and the other relevant ministries, we went to Ketekrachi to inspect an administration block. We got to the administration and there was nothing. Okay? And we contacted the coordinating director. And he said, yes, they've sent proposal to government that they wanted an administrative block, a 3-story administrative block. But there's nothing there. And this is the issue that the site where, the proposed site, where they wanted the project, and there was nothing there. So when we returned back to Dambai, that's the RCC, we were informed that no, the project you are looking for is not meant for the municipal assembly. It's for the regional feeder roads.
Wow.
And when we went there, we actually saw that structure. But then the signage, that's where the problem is. The signage did not capture that the source of fund is either from ABFA or ABFA is co-funding that structure. Right. Right. And that is where some of this problem is. But if you have captured ABFA, everybody will have known, including us, that this project is being funded with oil money. And that is the situation all over the country. All over the country. So that is a major problem. Yeah. As we wrap the conversation, I'll give you 30 seconds each. On the back of all these things we've mentioned, what do you feel are some of the solutions we ought to be looking at? We've already mentioned some of them in terms of even the 4 targets, reducing them, and all of that. Yes, but in 30 seconds each, very brief, what do you feel are the things we ought to be looking at to resolve some of these problems? I'll start with you, Mark. I think we should go back to the default position of the PRMA by having a long-term national development plan in place. That will long-term national development plan. That will guide. How many years are you looking at? It can be any number, but 20 years, it can be broken down. 20 years, 40 years. Give us a timeline. We can have 40 years and then broken down into 10 years, 10 years, 10 years for implementation. For you, Isaac.
Okay, so, I mean, 10 years on since the coming into force of the Act, we have done well with transparency. We should transition to accountability, where those who have direct charge of the management of the petroleum revenues get to meet the people who are the real beneficiaries of the project. So regional administration, district administration, let them be involved. Let them know that a project is being done, is being funded from petroleum revenue, and that they have inputs. It just doesn't come from Accra. One day just a contractor finds their way into their locality and then they are doing a project. There's no sense of ownership. And then the people tend to be apathetic towards the project. So and continuous engagement it will be key to improving the sector.
Well, it's been a refreshing conversation, gentlemen, and the conversation always continues. Yeah. And we're hoping that as matters move forward and as your new reports come, we shall continue with the engagement. Thank you so much. Thank you. That is Mark Agyemang, Technical Manager with PIAC, and of course, Isaac Dwamena, Coordinator with PIAC. Thank you for staying, but it's not a wrap yet on the show. Coming up, we're talking about the weekly weather forecast. It's a look at the weather patterns as the rainy season gets into full swing, and what the expectations should be planning, the way forward. Do stay. We'll be back.